new microphone or new whatever the gizmos happen. Apparently we're live, everybody's favorite Thursday afternoon 5 p.m. show, the Property Professionals. So we've got a special guest on, and you're familiar with him because he was on last week's show, and then the Fed pulled a fast one on us, so we've had to get him back on twice. You know what? I'm going to just turn it over and turn this into the Mitesh show, I think. So you've been here so often. But, I mean, I don't like listening to the news. And when I heard that they'd whacked up the interest rates by 0.75%, I almost fell on the floor. So, and I thought, whoa, this is like, after the events of the last 2 years, the Ukraine war, and now we've got the Fed boosting up these interest rates. I'm not sure I'm nearly running out of words, but obviously I'm not, right? So I must have had my Weetabix or something, although other brands of cereal are. Anyway, let's enough of my poor jokes and all this. Mucking around aside, it's potentially quite serious. And so we've twisted his arm, somehow done a deal with the devil, right? So we've got Mitesh back. He's not the devil. That's probably the Fed now, right? So we've got Mitesh back, and we said, "Come on, mate. What does this mean for people like our viewers in terms of everyone in the country's probably got a mortgage unless you're really lucky." And if you're a property investor, you've probably definitely got a mortgage, and we've got all sorts of, everyone's in debt, so they're all borrowing money. So Mitesh, give us your wisdom on this inflation thing. Listen, I'm going to try and be quiet and listen, but I can't promise you that. Obviously, off you go and give us a briefing, and let me know when I can ask some of my really fascinating and interesting questions.
Sure. It's interesting you talk about the devil. So I could be considered as the agent for the devil. So yeah, it's interesting. Sorry, I've got the wrong share of the screen. Can you see my screen at the moment? I don't think you can. Give me 1 second.
You mean the question you want to ask me is, and let me guess, have I put enough 50p's in so that you could share the screen, right?
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, you'll have to be 50p's today because Srinder's skiving somewhere. He's on a special secret mission somewhere. I can't even tell you where he's gone because it's like super secret, right? Anyway, I put enough 50p's in. I think you might be able to share the screen, but don't quote me on that. Famous last words. Have a go.
Right. Give me a second. Hopefully. There we are.
So you're going to have to be super quick. Remember, it's only 50p's, not £50 notes this week. Go for it.
Okay, great. So in case you're watching this for the first time, let me just introduce myself. So my name is Mitesh Manik. I work as a mortgage consultant. You've got my direct mobile number, email address, and a website address for our company. So we're a directly authorized firm with 8 advisors. Our firm is based in Bracknell. We have a wide range of experience in all types of finance, and I'll touch a bit about that a bit later. So this week's session is going to be a bit different, quite different actually, compared to the previous sessions, because the topic we are actually considering today is on inflation. And more importantly, it's more around the impact on the housing market, the mortgage interest rates, looking at the consequences as it stands right now, prediction for the next 6 months, and also looking at the picture into the next year. So been doing some research over the last few days, especially with the Bank of England base rate now being at 1.25, and looking at how lenders are reacting. It's actually quite a worrying time, because I've been around doing mortgages for the last 17 years, and I'm not really used to seeing these type of rates in reality, because for the last 10 years, especially with residential rates, they've been historically very, very low. So today's session also will cover around what I am thinking personally and what I would advise my clients to do as well. Having said that, 80% of my business comes from portfolio clients, so they're getting impacted as well, but not as much as residential homeowners or first-time buyers or home movers, and you'll see that as we carry on in the session. So this is kind of the current news really on inflation. So we're looking at a record jump to 9%. April's increase has been the biggest jump on record, and it's at a 40-year high. Those numbers seem very scary, to be honest. 40-year high. So that's just about close to when I was born, I guess. The largest upward contribution to the annual inflation rate came from housing and household services. So 2.76 percentage points, principally from electricity, gas and other fuels, and owner-occupiers' housing cost. And obviously we all know transport cost has gone up, so that's 1.47 percentage points that contributed to that as well. And I then took this quote from one of the websites that was sort of looking deeply into kind of what's happening, and then there was a comment by the Bank of England governor. And that's quite scary if he's sort of thinking along these lines, that the food prices hikes coming down the track, and said the central bank is unable to stop inflation hitting double digits later this year. So if the Bank of England's thinking like that already now, that's basically telling us that the impact of interest rates, in terms of mortgage interest rates, will be the same, in terms of the fact that they really can't go down. So what I thought I would look at and focus more on is what's happening in the mortgage market, especially in terms of rates. So let's first focus on the residential rates over the last 3 months, which has really soared. So my clients have been looking at rates circa 1%, 1.1, 1.2 in those regions. And within the last 3 months, currently right now, at 75% lend on residential mortgages, whether it's home mover, first time buyer, we're looking at circa potentially around 3.5%, especially if you're trying to fix it for a longer period, like 5 years. It's a massive, massive jump. If we're talking 3% plus on residential rates right now, that is almost in line with the buy-to-let rates. In fact, you could potentially even pick up a cheaper buy-to-let rate than a residential mortgage rate. Now, I haven't seen that before for many years since I've been advising on mortgages. Traditionally, in my head, I've always believed that the residential mortgage market rates are circa between 1 to 2.5 at the most, and then you get into the picture where buy-to-lets then start from 2 point something all the way to potentially 4%. And that keeps things simple when you try and explain clients the difference in rates between buy-to-let and residential rates. I've come from an HSBC background, so I was with HSBC from 2005 to 2012, and I remember advising clients at that time on tracker rates, and it was interesting that HSBC did lifetime tracker rates. So some of my clients right now, probably, let's say within the last 3 months, have sort of really enjoyed rates circa 1% on tracker rates or below, and obviously they've now seen a hike in rates, so potentially they might be paying no more than 2%, I guess, if they've decided to stick with their tracker rate. If any of you have an HSBC lifetime tracker rate that you've taken out many years ago, and it's a question I get asked a lot of times, which is why I'm stressing on this side now rather than later, in terms of what do you think I should do? Should I fix it or not? If you logically think about the way things stand right now, it is a difficult one. Before, it used to be an easy answer. Before, the answer was don't touch the rate, leave it as it is, because it's a lifetime tracker rate. So the increment will be very gradual. And if it does happen, at that time it was if it does happen in the next 6 months, and a 0.25% increase here and there. So the clients were quite comfortable. The reason why then you had to make a change was if you're trying to move house, you wanted to borrow additional money, then you could consider options like porting the existing rate and then looking at a top up on a new rate potentially. And that top up even could have been another tracker rate on different terms. I don't want to make it too complicated, but if you logically think about right now on residential rates where they are, and if you're on a tracker rate, then you seriously do need to think if you're comfortable with the increment of the £100 a month that you potentially are going to see probably month in, month out, and whether you are one of those people that have a mindset of having a budget every month for your outgoings. So I'm going to use the word budget today because it's basically bringing all my training from my banking days, because that's one of the things that we had to do anyway for every client, and we still do now, more and more so important, because of the fact that apart from just the mortgage payments that you're looking at, because obviously that's going to be your biggest commitment every month, unfortunately you also have to then consider fuel cost, food, shopping, and also utility costs, because all these are now more significantly higher than they used to be. So it's not a very easy answer. I would suggest if you are considering a residential mortgage right now, I would try and go back to basics. And what I mean by that is, search online if you have to for what a budget planner looks like. List down all the expenditure that you are forecasting or the next 6 to 12 months, especially for the next 12 months, because as you can imagine, everything's going up and up. And that way you should be able to then provide an accurate figure when you deal with a mortgage broker or a bank, when you go in and ask for a mortgage illustration, or you just kind of try and find out what your mortgage payments will look like, because one of the questions they'll ask you, or should be asking you, is what is your budget, and accordingly we can then decide on the term of the mortgage, whether it's going to be a 40-year term, a 30-year term, a 15-year term, a 20 or 25, and which is basically the right way of conducting business. So I say back to basic. What I really mean by that is that you have to spend more time with the clients really now, especially if you're looking at advising on residential mortgages, because you need to really understand the client's long-term plans. So one of the things that I've mentioned on, I think, one of the slides later on, and I might as well cover it now because we're on the topic of residential mortgages, is traditionally, and I say traditionally because I would say at least 90% of the clients I've worked with in the past, even when I was working in the bank, and even now, have always traditionally gone for a 2-year fixed rate option. Why? Purely on the basis that they're thinking, I need to look at my options at renewal after 2 years, because there'll be more equity in the property, because there'll be capital growth. My property should be worth more, which means my loan to valuation should be less. I may attract better rates. So if I've given you an 80% rate, then potentially in 2 years time you may be eligible for a 70% rate, which technically should be lower based on historical rates. And also at the same time, if you were to borrow an extra, let's say 25 to 50,000 on top, and you need a remortgage to a new lender, which most clients would want to do, then what would happen is that the overall lend, including the extra capital raise, will be on the same rate. So you benefit by having cheap additional borrowing which you then potentially could look at putting down as a deposit on your buy-to-let investment property, for example, which is traditionally what clients tend to do. Now, if somebody asks me the same question right now, what do you think I should do? It is a very difficult answer for that question. Why? Because there is no right answer for every client. You would have to then understand what your plans are over the next 2 to 5 years. So one of the questions I keep on asking my clients now is, what are your plans? Is your plan to grow your portfolio? And then if the answer is yes, then the next question is, how are you going to fund for the deposit and costs and so on? You can see where I'm going with this. And accordingly, you decide whether a 2-year option is better or a 5-year option is more suitable. I'll touch on one other point and move on. You can see on the list that I put down second charge market rates. So that is another area you could consider, because if you're tied into a first charge mortgage and you're only looking for a 25 to 50,000 or even £100,000 mortgage, and you've got a nice low rate on your first charge mortgage with your high street lender, then that could be an option. And I think I touched on a whole session on second charge previously. And funny enough, speaking to some of the companies that are sort of constantly dealing with the second charge market, the latest news I've received is that they're extremely busy, and I'm not surprised. So let's move on, and I'm sure there'll be probably more questions later. So buy-to-let rates under personal names have increased, and unfortunately they have increased in line with the residential rates. So everything that's been in terms of rates under personal names, buy-to-let and residential rates have really soared high. When I say soared high, you're looking at almost a 1% increase over the last, say, 4 weeks or so, almost. So that's quite scary. It's almost 1%. So if I've seen a client 2 months ago, I've done a deal, they've come back and said, let's do another deal. They've looked at the comparison rates. It's almost a 1% difference. And I've had 2 calls today just like that. And I'm having difficulty trying to explain to clients that although you feel that spending a week on looking at options that I've given you and discussing with your other half and parents or whatever may not be the same when you come and speak to me now. And so there's a bit of that shock factor that I'll say at the moment that's happening, is where clients have spoken to us in the past. And traditionally, sometimes when clients are just shopping around or they're planning ahead, which you should, which is the right thing to do, unfortunately, any discussions we've had even a week ago are going to be now non-relevant, because things have changed so much. So everything goes out of the window. It literally does, because you then look at fuel cost as well, cost of food, everything. When you start adding everything up, it just becomes very, very difficult, because when you come back, you'll have a different discussion. What I mean by that is that on a residential mortgage side, potentially your borrowing power may be reduced, and also because the monthly payments are quite high, you may be put off looking at going down that the route of taking that new deal, because it's not really sunk in that the rates are that high. In terms of the bridge finance rate, they haven't been impacted. You can still pick up bridge finance rate under 7% per annum. The interesting thing is that with bridge finance, because it's retained interest, what I mean by that is that if you take a bridge finance, let's say for 12 months, and because the idea is it's short-term finance, if you then clear it off within 6 months, because the project only lasts for 6 months, whatever you're doing, or even if you're selling the property after you've done some works to it, or rather than changing it to a buy-to-let from a bridge finance. So you've taken the bridge finance, done some works, and then you're looking at exit strategy as a buy-to-let mortgage. You get your interest back refunded to you, because the 12 months interest is normally taken up front, which is traditionally how bridge finance is done, which means technically, if you think about it, I'm saying 7%, you haven't really paid 7%, have you? So it's an interesting concept if you think about the fact that bridge finance looks pretty cheap compared to the residential and buy-to-let market. I would have never thought I would ever say that in my lifetime, but that is a real fact. So I actually worked it out today with one of my clients, and I just thought to myself in my head, he's going to keep that mortgage bridge finance for 12 months. So in reality, the actual interest that he's actually paying for that duration of the bridge is in line with what the normal rates are, really, if you think about it logically. Again, another very fascinating discussion around bridge finance to be had, especially considering options at this stage. Having said that, one other final point on bridge finance is that the danger you have is that you're thinking right now into what's happening, and you think you're getting a cracking deal at whatever 7% per annum or less than 7% per annum if you're very, very lucky. Then by the time you exit the bridge in 6 months' time, the story might be very different. So what do I mean by that? In terms of the rates that you're trying to apply for a term mortgage, whether it's residential or a buy-to-let, because the prediction is that rates are going up, it might be very different. So it could be quite scary to a point where you've taken the bridge finance, and in 6 months' time, when you come to exit, that the rate you're getting for that term product is probably going to be it probably looks higher than the actual bridge term facility loan, because it was taken 6 months ago. And when you start thinking about that more deeply, it becomes quite scary, because you never thought as mortgage advisors that would ever happen. So buy-to-let rates under limited company name. So it's very relevant, because a lot of my clients, especially a lot of investors have limited company structures set up. They're buying in their properties in limited company name or remortgaging. They have increased, but not significantly. So they've probably seen a 0.25% to 0.5% increment, but not as much as the residential market. So it's a good sign, which is why I keep on saying that the rates are aligning. The second charge market rates have increased, but again, I can tell you for now, the latest deal I've had currently today, and I've had some terms issued, and the deal was around circa 5.5%. Not bad. 5.5% fixed for 5 years with no tie-ins. So cracking deal. 5 year fixed rate, no tie-ins, which means that can be paid anytime. Why do I say cracking? Because if the client then decided to do a remortgage right now, because it's a small amount on the second charge, it may not make much sense, because of the fact that the existing first charge rate is so low. So why would you want to do that? Which is why it's a very good example where the client's thinking, you know what, I might even keep that deal for a longer term, because in 6 months' time, that 5.5% might look extremely attractive to me. So why would I want to pay it off? So I might as well look at investing that extra cash that I have sitting after 6 months somewhere else. So again, important decisions to be made, and also it's good to speak to the right type of broker, I would say, especially in the current climate, to ask these intelligent questions. That's the reason why I'm discussing this, is to ask those intelligent questions around, should I not? Should I pay off a debt? Not? Should I keep hold of the money? Maybe it might be worthwhile me using the money because it looks like cheap borrowing right now compared to the next 12 months. Should I then maybe invest that money somewhere else? That somewhere else could be anywhere, I guess, depending on what project you're considering. So I've always said that in the past when I've looked at options of remortgage financing. I've always said to my clients, and some clients obviously haven't taken the hint, but I've always said, take the maximum borrowing. Why? Because money's so cheap. I think a lot of my clients obviously didn't understand the concept, what I was talking about, but I think they will now when I mention, because the extra 10% on the remortgage, even if the rates are slightly higher by 0.25%, at that time, when I said that time, I'm just talking about 2 months ago. Anything leading up to 2 months ago would have been so cheap money. And then obviously you're keeping that cash because you've got a project. Even if you keep that cash for 6 to 9 months, it would have still been worth it. Obviously, then all the other option you have after 6 months, guess what? Maybe a second charge option. So something important to bear in mind right now. Commercial investment and unoccupied rates have increased as well. So they have. Traditionally, I think if you go down a tracker rate route, you might pick up circa under 5% rates because it's tracker. But fixed rates will be definitely higher than 5%. So you're hinging at 5, 6, or 6.25% rates in the commercial world. So impact and predictions. I mentioned this, so borrowing power has reduced and potentially will be reduced, but there's been an announcement by the Bank of England recently about lenders having the power to try and see how they can remove their stress test criteria and giving them more freedom to decide what to make or adapt changes within the systems to be able to allow borrowers to borrow more money. Now that announcement's happened quite recently, if I'm not mistaken, maybe in the last 48 to 72 hours. Lenders haven't yet reacted to it greatly. We're not hearing or seeing any updates from lenders, but my gut feel is that there are some lenders already at this stage where what they say to us is that if the client's happy to consider a 5-year product, it's there on my list, compared to a 2-year product, then potentially they can get more money. That might be the way forward with some lenders, because obviously what they're saying is that our systems are then geared towards understanding the cost of borrowing plus the other expenditure, which is going to be fixed for the next 5 years, so which is why we can give you the extra 20, 30, 40, 50,000 pounds more. Potentially that could happen, we don't know. Having said that, I did cover a session before where I talked about joint borrower or proprietor. I'll leave that as a question mark there, because see, there are options there, but what I'm basically saying is 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, 5 people, 6 people coming together on the borrowing, with probably just the odd one person then buying the property in their name. Again, could be a way forward. One lender in particular has designed that at the moment. We don't know, other lenders may follow suit in terms of looking at creative way of thinking around borrowing, but we'll have to watch the space. High interest rates are predicted, so they definitely are predicted. We've got a gap now for another month because the next announcement is going to be in August. So having said that, I have seen lenders, prime lenders, high street, just off high street lenders, where they have really bumped up the rates in the last 2-3 days. So we sometimes get notice that within 24 hours rates are going up, sometimes 48 hours, but no longer than that. Sometimes it's instant, same day, by midday we get a notice from the lender, by 5 p.m. that deal's gone, which makes our life very difficult. Lenders would need to adapt. I have actually put it on there. They would need to adapt because life's going to be very difficult, especially with the residential side, in terms of trying to lend more money on that side. So I talked about impact and prediction. So I would say the lower income earners are the group of people that will get hit the hardest, purely on one simple reason: disposable income. So as it is, disposable income's low, and so the impact will be felt the most, and which is why I come back to the same bit that I mentioned earlier about a budget planner and the importance of having a budget planner. Seems like very basic, very old school way of thinking. It isn't. I would say jot everything down. It'll just make life a bit more easier, rather than relying on then credit cards and overdraft facilities, which is never a good sign when you're trying to get a mortgage from a lender. So just thought I'd share a bit about one of the reviews I've had, and this was I just thought I'll pick this one up. I may have looked at this before in the past, but it's so relevant in today's time. And this was a client in lockdown that wanted a 90% mortgage, and it was interesting how I managed to help her. And this is just more reiterating the fact that this is not more about me, but in general, it's always good to have a connection with a mortgage broker to look at rates and options, because the mortgage broker will have access to a team of managers, a team that are specialists within the mortgage department that the lender has, compared to the points of contacts you have as a customer. So when you ring a bank direct compared to coming to us, it is a massive difference. It may seem a bit shocking to some of the viewers, but that is the facts. And this was basically what happened. The clients basically put it down as in they've expressed their views talking about exactly what's happened. And basically what's happened there is the clients rung the lender, the deal was getting pulled. It was a Friday. It was being locked down. It was a 90% deal, which is quite rare at that time, with a 10% deposit purchase. The lender got very busy. They tried ringing the bank. They were told no. I picked up the inquiry. Got an email, rang them same day. By same day Friday lunchtime, had a phone call, which was literally 2.5 hours later, from the point that I'd spoken to the lender, who had said no. At that point, obviously, the client wasn't aware of which lender. By the time we decided it was the right thing to do based on the rates I was quoting, that she said yes. We carried on, and by mid-afternoon on the same day, the client goes, "Hang on a second, this is the same lender I spoke to this morning," and they said no. I said, "I'm really sorry. I've got different points of contacts, and at one point I had the client on one hand, I had the lender on the other line, trying to sort out the deal, because there's a couple of things that were quite quirky, and by Friday or by Saturday morning, if I'm not mistaken, because the deal was going, I think I had to work on that Saturday, which was quite rare for me, because obviously it was just crazy times like that during COVID. So we finished the mortgage, I think, before Saturday midday, and the deal was getting pulled by Monday, which is why they were obviously mentioned about saving my purchase, because they were really struggling. They had the 10% deposit, and this is a client that was waiting for more than a year to find a property. So you can imagine they were extremely happy. So I'll end on that and just basically talk about what else I do. So I can look at bridge finance, commercial, development finance, second charge, portfolio lend, residential, and personal business protection as well. This is a picture of the team, because I mentioned that we're 8 of us. The MD is there on the far right, and you can see that we've got a very good team, and we had an event at the Crown Plaza back a few months ago, and we're going to have this is the Crown Plaza in Gerrards Cross, and we're going to have another one in September. So I'll definitely let everybody know near the time that you can obviously book your tickets and join us. I think it'll be an interesting time to have an event in September for sure. And it will be a different kind of discussion, guaranteed, because obviously the market's changed so much since obviously the event that we had a few months back. So I'll stop sharing now, conscious of time as well, so I'll open up the session for questions. Hopefully you found the discussions or the presentation useful.
Very interesting. So, am I allowed to say "told you so"?
Yeah, we've been having chats over this now. So yeah, I wasn't prepared, honestly. I didn't think it was going to be that fast. I've always thought that the Bank of England would be a bit more cautious. They have been in the past, but this time around, it's been quite scary, because it's one increase after the next month after month. So it was a bit of a shock to me, but then I realized obviously there was a summer break, so I'm not surprised now, because technically then you've got a rollover, haven't you, one of the month?
Yep. So I remember being on a webinar when they dropped the stamp duty.
Yeah.
And the comment was, "We've been here before, we've seen this. This will cause house price inflation."
Yeah.
That's why my comment. And then they've added QE to the lockdown. Okay. And everybody is, including me, has wasted all their invested badly all their what was it, coronavirus stuff, the scheme that the government had.
Oh, yeah, the Civils loan scheme.
Not the loan scheme. I'm not in trouble with that yet, but you know the what do they call it? I can't remember the word now. It's amazing. When they were paying you to stay home and not do anything.
Bounce back.
No, not the bounce back, but furlough.
Oh, furlough, right?
Yeah.
Employers, yeah.
everybody used their furlough for various stuff that they shouldn't have done, right? Basically, they didn't build a budget, and this is quite shocking. So let me ask you the hard question first.
Yeah.
Finger in the air. Where are rates going to get to? Where are they going to peak? Your prediction.
It's a hard one. My prediction is potentially by December over 2%. And it's not unrealistic to see that happen. And if inflation carries on going up and up from 9 to 11%, I don't know. Recession? I don't know. It's a tough one. December, January periods will be the hardest for obvious reasons for many clients. Food shopping bills go up as well. Winter fuel. It's hard to imagine, especially talk about lower income earners. So it is quite scary. Obviously, some people, quite a lot of people are relying on food banks as well. So as long as you've got your job, I guess we're kind of touch wood. Okay. Because once that sector starts going downhill, I think when I talk about recession, that probably might just happen, because if the job market and unemployment market hits up there in terms of numbers, then you've got a very big problem on your hands.
I think the States are already potentially in recession. I mean, this actually doesn't make sense what they're doing, because here's my view. Amateur economists, right? Inflate. When people were silly throwing their money away in furlough, giving it to Mr. Amazon,
yeah,
they didn't put the rates up, right? Perhaps understandably. Now, all the shocks are external.
Yeah.
So the fuel bills are going up because of Mr. Putin and Ukraine. The energy bills are going up because of the gas prices there.
Yeah.
The second-hand cars have gone up because the production hasn't come back yet from
right.
From the lockdown.
Lockdown, yeah.
Yeah. It's a case of they haven't returned to full capacity just yet, but it's not because people are buying too much. Well, they are buying too much. We all buy too much crap that we don't need, right? But it's not, and the house prices have already gone up. They went up 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So we all saw them go up silly amounts.
They did. That's right.
Yeah. So normally they put up interest rates to take the heat out of the economy.
That's right. Yeah.
But it's not going to have any effect. In fact, it's going to make it worse. Yeah. So how far what do you think? 2% is where they're going to peak, or they're going to carry on going further than that? Because in the States, they're 150, is that right?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't checked there, but for the UK market, because if you think about when I talked about the 3.5% residential rates, because remember I said to you it's the residential market rates, mortgage rates that get impacted the most. So 1.25 Bank of England, 3.5-ish rates, or typically at 75% lending, there and thereabouts. If you start hitting at 2%, another 1%. So everyone's predicting, whoever I speak to, that it'll be back to those days before the rates started going down. Was it more than 10 years ago? 2009, if I'm not mistaken. 5% was the norm. 5% rates, 5.5% was the norm. I remember when I started HSBC, fixed rates were sort of 5.5%. I remember around that sort of type of margin of rate. So a lot of people are saying, we're preparing for those numbers. So I wouldn't be surprised that then, you're looking at interest rates at that level, which takes you back all the way more than 10 years ago when rates were like that.
So if I'm understanding this right, the residential mortgage,
market rate,
mortgages are usually lower than buy to let.
That's
But you're saying they've jumped the most,
Yeah.
and in certain cases, they could potentially be higher or
They
equal.
already are in most cases. It's
Um,
how the lenders are funded, and that's what it is really.
How the what?
How the lenders are getting funded. So if it's private funding, which is why in bridge finance there's a lot of private funding, then they'll set the rates and how the investors would like the returns. So it's a different setup, no? So it's not about it is complicated because it's how the structure of funding is. With bridge finance lending, sometimes lenders will have funding from 5-6 different sources, and they'll decide where to dip their hands depending on the deal. And sometimes they have to go and check with the funders as well whether they can dip their hands into that pot of money. So I would say that it's a different way of financing. So that makes a big difference. So I am also very much aware that the bridge finance market has slowed down for sure compared to the lockdown days. I'm pretty sure that at that time I'd seen the applications were higher in terms of volume. They have come down, I know for a fact, because obviously I get lots of calls from bridge finance lenders. That's already a sign that is the case. And the other sign is that the rates are still looking very attractive. So that is another sign that they are hungry for business at the moment. So they have a lot of money to lend.
So the residential guys have jumped dramatically.
Yeah.
Buy to let has just gone up a little bit.
Yeah.
And the bridge finance guys haven't gone up that much.
Or hardly anything.
Hardly anything.
Yeah.
That's weird in the market, isn't it?
Very weird. I've never seen that happen before.
All right. Now, yeah, it's just really interesting. Now, did I catch it right? So when mortgage companies make an offer,
yeah,
they can change it any time before completion. They don't have this 30-day valid thing, do they?
That's a very good question you raised. So traditionally, and my understanding is that once the lender has issued an offer, and I'm going to generalize this because I've seen some shocking things happen over the last few weeks with one particular lender.
Can we not name them?
No.
But can you drop a hint?
No. It was a buy-to-let lender.
Not a high street lender?
No. So what had happened was my client had already secured a deal. When I say secured a deal, paid for it, an application went through, underwriting happened, valuation was pending. And they basically turned and said, you've got a deadline of this date, regardless of what's happening, which is not in our control. If the valuation report doesn't come back and we can't issue the offer by this date, this is the deadline, you lose the deal. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. That normally doesn't happen. They said it's just the way we're funded and we can't afford to work, in the same way as other lenders might. So where everyone's different in this sector in terms of how we're funded, which is why I brought up the subject of how lenders are funded. But this was on the buy-to-let side, specialist buy-to-let lender. Traditionally, I would say what tends to happen is once you put the application in, you've either added the fee to the loan or you've paid for the product fee, the 999 fee or the 1%, 2% arrangement fee if it's your traditional limited company buy-to-let products, then you're fine, generally speaking. But as I said, I've seen that over the last 4 to 6 weeks, which was quite worrying. But from the residential market side, my understanding normally is that once you put the application in, you're fine. And post offer, I've had 3 clients in the last 3 months that have queried the same thing: is my 1 point odd rate still safe from February, March time since we did the application and since the offer was issued? And the answer is yes, it is, because the validity with most lenders is 6 months or expiry of the offer. So it's normally 6 months, which aligns with the validity of the valuation report. Normally it's valid for 6 months, and most lenders would have a validity of the offer date for 6 months. Some lenders do have it for 3 months, but it's quite rare. But it's normally 6 months. So
And
yeah, well, let's finish off. So, and I think I've touched on this on many um, sessions before, is that I would suggest you really think hard and plan ahead for next year now, especially if you've got a deal expiring in January or February next year, or sooner, and try and lock in a deal now.
okay, so when and you guys often talk about start thinking 6 months ahead. So if you,
Guess what? It's now is becoming a reality, isn't it?
yeah, yeah,
It was just words before. That way, we've been trained up from the bank to say this or whatever. Contingency funds and emergency funds are terminologies that we've been trained up with. But guess what? It is now becoming more and more common
important.
knowledge that we need to do that. And funny enough, when you talk about contingency and emergency funds, in the banking days, we always used to look at what clients had in the background from the savings and all that in case unemployment hit hard on them or things like that. And underwriters used to think like that when I was when I was in the bank. And the same way, when you do a buy-to-let mortgage, if you're overexposed and you don't have any much savings, there are certain lenders that are trying to say, look, what will happen during void periods? How are you going to manage those payments? And they'll decline the case because they're thinking you don't have any spare cash left. You're putting a lot of money, borrowing a lot of money here and there, and when you look at your accounts, savings, backup, there's nothing there. So we always say that have contingency for 6 months. So it's becoming more and more important. So don't overexpose yourself if you don't have a lot of cash. So think about your existing portfolio as well, just in case there's another problem around the corner, which hopefully there shouldn't be, because obviously lockdown caused a huge amount of issues for landlords, especially when tenants decided not to leave the property. So yeah, you
Now,
have to take into consideration all that.
hang on a minute.
Yeah.
We've had so many, not even could say once in a generation, probably once in 100-year events. We've had the coronavirus, we've had the war in Europe, we've had.
Lockdown, everything. We got everything. Yeah. But in some ways, you know what? You may look at it on the positive side, saying that now.
Hang on. Right. So all of yours, we're going to find something positive. Right. Go for it. Have a go.
In life, when events happen, there's a saying that you become wiser because of the fact that you've experienced it. So I know you can turn and say to me, back in my days, I was, I used to, pay X amount of interest, 10% plus and all that, and I'm experienced. I understand how that feels like, and we adapted to the situation. That's what I'm trying to say. Is that you now become more sensible. You become more experienced. So your decisions and your choices you make, you'll be more cautious. Before, the attitude from clients was very much like borrow, endless, and not think about consequences at all. And I think now they're stepping back and thinking, shall I not? And that's a good sign. That's what I'm saying.
You really think they're thinking, okay, all right.
They really are. I'm telling you they are, because I can sense when there's an urgency, but then when you start having discussion on rates and what's happening, they're taking their time. They're thinking, shall I not? Am I overexposing myself? Should I be then going for this type of property, or should I then downgrade and look for something lower? Because you have to look at the contingency, especially if you're a portfolio landlord. If you geared your portfolio at 75% and more, then you need to really think hard whether that's a right way of going forward if you're already exposed at that level. But if you got properties in the right locations, and there's a huge demand, and there's a huge demand of the rental market, and prices are going up, as far as from what I know from clients especially. Everyone's saying to me, we're looking at renewing our tenancy agreements, and it's going up by £100 or £50 increment, and that's already a sign saying that obviously demand's peaked. Estate agents are telling their clients that they can get more rent, especially if tenants moving out. So it kind of swings a bit roundabouts there, because then obviously that increases your borrowing power as well, because the higher the rental income, potentially the higher the mortgage amount, especially if it's a buy-to-let mortgage. So it can be quite tempting, but it depends on your plan. So you'd have to really think. It could be that you had a project that you had parked because of COVID and lockdown, and you were thinking, oh my god, all this extra cost of raw material and so on, and maybe at that time you didn't get a bonus from work, and things might have been different now, and I know they are. So and if you're really thinking, this is the right time for me to invest, then there's nothing wrong with it. What I'm saying is that just be more prepared and have those additional discussions with a specialist broker. But I'll leave you with a final thought on what I've just said, is act quickly, because obviously rates are changing so dramatically.
Be prepared and act quickly. I think that's great advice. Mitesh, thank you very much. Interesting discussion on what's going on. So look, it's been fascinating for me, especially the thing about how the rates for the residential guys are higher than buy-to-let, and then,
yeah.
So that's fantastic. Thank you very much for your time. Great input. Really interesting stuff. I'm sure we'll have you back at some point to see what the hell's going on with it.
Yeah, I will make sure that I'm back, and hopefully next time when I'm back, hopefully we'll have more reactions from the lenders, I'm hoping, in terms of what they're doing, and then I can update the viewers on how lenders are thinking going forward, especially looking at the residential borrowing side of things.
Unfortunately, it looks as if for the next 6 months there's not going to be much good news around.
Well, on one hand, you can obviously say that, but on the other hand, if the lenders are adapting and you're desperately looking to buy a house, then potentially they may have schemes in place or criteria in place that may work in your favor. That's what I'm trying to say. So what I'm saying is that, at the end of the day, lenders are aware these things do happen, but they have to have those board meetings and make sure that they make the right decisions.
All right. So you're going to try and bring us some good news. We look forward to seeing you. Fantastic. I can't wait for the good news. Right. Fascinating program. Unfortunately, I'm not a gloomy person, so all I can say is be prepared, as our friend here said.
Yeah.
Be prepared, act quickly,
but
mainly have contingencies. It's going to be challenging.
I think, let's leave it at that point, is have contingencies. We've never stressed on that before. A mortgage broker, sometimes, if you logically think about it, don't normally, but a good experienced mortgage broker will start probably thinking that that's advice I should be giving my clients now, as I start having my fact-finding meetings and preparing my reports for my advice. Maybe I need to put that line in to say, have contingency plans in place.
Great. Thank you, Mitesh. And put in a contingency for coming onto our program is all I'm going to say. To all of you, I hope you found that really fascinating. I definitely did. And guess what? We'll be back next Thursday, 5 p.m. We might even bring Srinder back with his £50 notes. Talk about inflation. There's me with my 50p's. And anyway, Thursday afternoon, 5 p.m. Mitesh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Join us every week when we talk property, money, and all these sort of interesting subjects.
Thanks, Dil. I'm sure Surinder's looking at his options for his new Porsche and Jaguar, and I'm sure he'll.
I can't tell you what he's doing because you wouldn't believe it if I did. Anyway, we might ask him next week when he comes back.
Yeah, I think it'll be fascinating to find out, because he always has a story about Jaguars and Porsches. So.
Oh dear! Don't encourage him, please. Right. We'll see everybody next Thursday, 5 p.m. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe. It'll help us out a lot. I hope you find this interesting. See you next week, Thursday, 5